Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of Duo, a rent-to-own scheme by Mixta Africa. My name is Tade Adeniyi, and I have with me here Rolake Akikube Filani, the Chief Commercial Officer at Mixta Africa. Rolake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tade. Great to be here. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, how are you feeling generally about this launch?
Well, Tade, it's pretty exciting because it's the first of its kind that Mixta has launched. And if you put it in the broader context of where we find ourselves in terms of the housing market and the sector, I think it's a solution whose time has come, really.
That's great. And I agree. I'm sure it's been a busy week getting the scheme up and running. I know we launched on Monday. So you're saying there's general excitement about the scheme?
I think there's a lot of excitement. Obviously, first of all, from the team that has worked on it internally. You know, it's been a cross-functional team. Several departments have put heads together. It's been a collaborative effort. I think that says a lot, first of all, about the Mixta spirit. But just in terms of market fillers and how people are feeling, there is a lot of excitement that we already have quite the list of interested prospects who want to know more about it. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this session today.
Okay, that's great to hear. So to start off this conversation, I'd like you to give us a brief introduction about Mixta Africa. What's its mission, especially for people that are just interacting with Mixta Africa for the first time?
Okay, so Mixta Africa is a Pan-African real estate and housing developer. I think we always say that we're not just a real estate developer, we actually develop world-class infrastructure. We've been in this business for many, many years. We have a footprint across 5 countries currently: Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Tunisia, and Morocco. We also have project experience in some additional countries like Egypt, Algeria, and Mauritania. So we've been doing this for many, many years, over 20 years of track record, quite an extensive bank land. We've built and delivered more than 14,000 housing units, including land, across the African continent. So we are, we're quite established in this game, but we're also currently continuously innovating in the game because, market dynamics are ever changing.
And I mean, the Duo scheme in itself, it's innovation. It's trying to increase housing penetration, home ownership for people, and affordability, because we know the challenges that the real estate market faces in Nigeria. All right, so we'll go straight into it. So can you tell us about Duo? What is this product about? I know we've heard that it's a rent-to-own scheme, but what is it really about?
Well, maybe I will start from the brand name and the concept. When you think of Duo, you think two, right?
Exactly.
So essentially what we're saying to the market, we're offering you 2 things. First of all, you start your entry into the scheme as a tenant, and hopefully you end your participation in the scheme as a landlord. So you're getting 2 things, and you're getting that in the space of 3 years, which is quite phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, best of both worlds.
Yeah, the best of both worlds. And really, if you look at what is happening in the market today, let's look at home ownership in Nigeria. Less than 25% of Nigeria own their own homes. Compare that to other markets on the African continent, such as Kenya, which is almost at 70%. South Africa is a little over 50%. Other emerging markets like Indonesia are doing much better. So I think there's a lot we could do to improve the prospects of ordinary, everyday Nigerians getting on the housing ladder. And then beyond that, you have to look at the fact that although we've had a mortgage industry for many years, we haven't been able to plug that funding gap on the consumer end as fast as we can. Obviously, there are a lot of schemes that have been out, and of course, developers like us in the private sector have taken advantage of the National Housing Fund to help provide mortgages for affordable housing purchases. But one of our core values as a company is having an innovative mindset. So we had to really take a step back and say to ourselves, what else can we introduce? What other types of innovation has been done around the world that we could look at, refine, and adapt to the local context? And this was really the makings of Duo as a rent-to-own scheme. And of course, the final thing I will say in response to that question is that Mixta is developing affordable housing at scale. And people are at the forefront of our product innovation. Yeah. And we always start from the end point of the user. There's several problems: is accessibility, And accessibility is usually qualified by affordability.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think the very first thing this solves is that for those who've been unable to obtain a mortgage, usually because the entry point for mortgages can be quite high. And when I say the entry point, I usually mean the initial deposit or the down payment or the equity, whatever name you need to give to it. So the first thing is to find a way of lowering the barriers to entry. That's the first thing. So we're saying essentially under the DOOR scheme, your initial equity deposit is 5%. I think the second problem it solves is the manner and mode of servicing. We've tried to introduce some flexibility into the whole scheme. So what it means is that you can essentially pay your annual rent as savings towards your final home acquisition, right? So you know now if you're paying rent, people refer to rent in sort of layman's terms as dead money, because you're essentially helping somebody else fund their own home, their own mortgage by paying rent to landlord, right? Yes. So the idea is that rent you're paying annually, hopefully it won't go to waste, and at the end of the day, it will form part of your eventual home acquisition value. It will be deducted from your eventual home acquisition value. So in a sense, we're almost acting like a sort of a piggy bank.
Yes, like that's what I was going to say, like a savings scheme.
Like a savings scheme. Savings schemes that is clear and transparent. So that yearly rent that you're paying is going into part of your eventual home acquisition. And I think finally, it's really a socioeconomic problem we're solving, because from a broader perspective, I think home ownership is aspirational, but home ownership also has other ripple effects, other multiplier effects. If we trace it all back to the construction and the housing value chain, you're actually helping to create jobs, because there's a whole service provision element that comes to, first of all, having a rental industry. It is a service industry. You have things like facility management, you have interior design, you have utility services, and so you're really at the heart of socioeconomic transformation, really, either as somebody who's renting or somebody who's buying and living in your own house. So there's a whole ecosystem of economic activity and value that is being created through this scheme. Yeah,
okay, that's interesting. And I'm sure people will be asking, what is the product for this scheme? Is it applied to any product, or have we designed a particular product for it, or is it already part of an existing product? So could you tell us more, and where is this product located?
Okay, so the pilot edition of DOOR, our rent-to-own scheme, is going to initially, in this first era or season, if you like, apply to a Marula Park development, which is one of our latest signature affordable housing developments. It's within the area we call Lagos New Town. Lagos New Town, for those of you who may not be so familiar, I'd like to think many of you are already familiar with Lagos New Town. But if you're not, Lagos New Town is a really pretty impressive land area along the Lekki Express corridor. And it actually currently hosts several residential communities, including the iconic Lakaway Lakes Golf and Country Estate. We have Beachwood Park 1 and 2 Estate, which is a large-scale development of affordable homes and bungalows. Lagos New Town also has the Adiva Playing Fields community, and Townsville, and of course the commercial plot. So Marula Park is situated within Lagos New Town, part of the Mixta Africa vision. And it's made up of 1, 2, and 3 bed apartments, but under the DOOR scheme, we're offering only the 2-bedroom apartments for rent to own. And it's going to be offered as fully finished 2-bed apartment units.
Fully finished?
Yes, fully finished. Yes.
So, I mean, that means when the person is moving in, all they have to do is just bring in their furniture.
And
just plug it in and they can start living
Absolutely.
there. Okay,
absolutely.
That's great. So, brings me to my next question. So, who is this product for? So, I mean, is it just for salary earners? Or if I was an entrepreneur, could I also key into this product? So could you tell us then also, one can already say, I already own a home, so why would I want to key into a rental scheme? So is there also like an investment proposition to it? Could you just tell us who is the target market?
Well, Tade, that's a lot of questions packed into one, but I'm going to do my best to go through it. Well, who is this for? This is not exclusive to salary earners. So if you look at traditional schemes that exist out there, for instance, NHF, in order to qualify for the National Housing Fund via the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, you have to be a salary earner because you contribute to the fund from your payroll. However, we have also identified those who potentially falling through the cracks, so to speak, particularly entrepreneurs. And we're saying to both those who are self-employed and those who are employees that you can sign up to go through screening for this scheme. So it's not exclusive. I think we're looking at a fairly young professional demographic, upwardly up-and-coming, upwardly mobile individuals, professionals, entrepreneurs, from across a wide variety of sectors, all fields of life, you know, all backgrounds. And I think the key thing is that we put everybody through a qualification and screening process, of course. And these are not things that are essentially too difficult to meet. This is the basic type of documentation you would require if you were applying for maybe to get your name or your PVC, you know, just the simple basic questions you'll get asked and maybe a bit more. So it's really anybody who aspires towards homeownership, but for whatever reason or the other cannot afford to make that huge down payment at the moment, or perhaps cannot meet the terms of a traditional mortgage product. I think the other question you asked is, you know, would you, for instance, Tade, key into this as an owner-occupier or as an investor? I think really it doesn't matter. Obviously, we want people to be able to live in their own homes because what we're creating is a residential thriving community. But we obviously realize that there will be some people who are very much interested but may not be in a position to move in when the homes are ready. So it can be an investment product. And one of the things we're allowing under this scheme is for people to be able to sublet it within some defined rules and terms.
And I guess that's very key. So I think the next thing that I was going to say is that how does this work? So I know you mentioned it, that I mean, if I'm interested in this scheme, I get to rent the property for a duration of 3 years. So is that just straight, is it straight line? Do I get to exit at any point? Then I know you mentioned some things about the application process as well. So what happens next? Do I just, once I pay my equity contribution, do I move in immediately? Or what happens? So just give us like a brief run through.
Okay, so let's take this back to the beginning and let's use sort of a scenario. So for instance, let's say the two-bed fully finished costs 30 million naira today. You go on the website or you call a customer service rep and you indicate interest. And how you indicate that interest is that you fill a basic form that just asks for basic details. Once you've done that, you then get sent a more detailed application form that then has a list of documentation that you need to send in and has additional questions. Once we receive your application, that documentation has to be sent within 2 to 3 weeks of completing that form. So it's things like your utility bills, a letter from your current employer, your pay slips, and a few other bits and bobs.
Just basic KYC
KYC documentation as well. We then embark on a screening process and a pre-qualification process that will take perhaps anywhere from from 2 weeks to up to a month, after which we formally write to you that congratulations, you've qualified to take up our rent-to-own scheme, at which point you will then be required to pay your 5% equity deposit. So if we're acting on the basis of this 30 million naira home scenario, the 5% is 1.5 million naira. And guess what? You can pay that 1.5 million naira in 2 installments. Because we are releasing just a limited number of units under this first batch, we expect subscribers to pay that 1.5 million, or at least the first half of it, by the 31st of August under the current scheme. So these homes are currently available at a promo price for the first 3 months, so between now and August. And then you can pay the second installment of your equity in December. Now, at the point at which you pay your equity, you will sign a commercial agreement with us. We have actually commenced construction in this 3-month period, and the homes will be delivered within an 18-month timeline. So your equity commitment essentially gives you an option to convert ownership by the 3rd year. Now, you may choose to convert much earlier than the 3rd year, but that's the basic principle of it. And at the point at which you convert, remember you start paying your rent from when you move in. After 18 months, you move into a fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment.
Fully finished?
Fully finished, sorry,
yeah.
not furnished.
Fully furnished.
We know
finished.
we're great,
yes.
but you know, fully finished. And so you pay your first year rent. Once the home is fully finished, you sign your tenancy agreement. And after that, you live and you move into your property, or you're subletting it. But remember, even if you're subletting, you're still responsible for the property and keeping the property. Now, you can decide that after the first year of renting, you've come into some money, you've got a promotion, a salary increase, and you can actually buy the home at that point. Okay. If you choose to buy the home at that point, remember, you've paid your equity of 1.5 million, if we're using a 30 million naira home scenario, and your first year's rent is also 5% of the value of the home, so you paid another 1.5 million. So essentially you paid 3 million. At that point, that 3 million is deducted from the initial 30 million.
Okay.
But of course, because of the time value of money, there's an interest element on the balance. And then what you pay at the end of the period of conversion is the home value, accounting for that interest, less the equity and the rent that you paid. But you know what I really love about this is that you're not just saving up towards your eventual home acquisition. But if you look at market dynamics and the rate of inflation in our economy, your eventual conversion price is still quite market competitive compared to trying to buy a home at that point in time in the future. So that's the basic principle. Yeah. And of course, if you're not ready in year 1, you can wait till year 3, which is the maximum rental period to convert. Yeah. And guess what? I keep throwing out all these additional benefits.
No, it's good.
You can convert through outright cash or through a mortgage.
Mortgage,
yes.
Yeah. So I think that brings me to, I think, one of the last questions I'm going to, last few questions I'm going to ask. So what would you tell somebody listening to this that is the selling point of even living in Marula Park? Why should they take advantage of this property or this opportunity and own a home at Marula Park?
Well, that is a very loaded question. There's so many different layers to it. First of all, let's even go back to just the basic principle of investing in Lagos Newtown as a whole. If you think back to many, many years ago, for those of us who grew up in Lagos, here in Nigeria, we know what this Lekki axis, this part of Etiosa local government used to look like. Lekki 1, for those of us like me who lived on the mainland, yes. It just felt like this desert that no one, who was ever going to live here. Yeah. Now look at what it is today. Those who bought homes in Lekki 1 today, many of them have actually sold their homes to commercial operators. And some of them have even moved further down the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway axis. So what that tells me that inevitably urbanization is catching up on us. There's a lot of commercial activity. The economy, you know, is pretty dynamic. So in terms of real estate as an investment proposition, you can't go wrong. It is a long-term store of value. So if you look at the amount of infrastructure we're investing in Lagos Newtown, what we've done in Lakaway Lakes, if you look at land valuation, the valuation of homes, we've seen, for instance, in our land bank, home prices valuation has increased by more than 40% over the last couple of years, actually since COVID. So that's one. The second thing is that Marula Park is a great investment and lifestyle proposition. All our communities are gated residential communities with the full gamut of infrastructure, utilities, water, electricity, and located not just in close proximity to Lagos Island, Victoria and Ikoyi, but sits between Ekpe and the Lekki Free Trade Zone and this. And we know there's a lot of infrastructure development that's going on in the area. And I think what Marula Park really offers is really a microcosm of what the ideal urban lifestyle should be like without breaking the bank. And that's one of the reasons that we've introduced this rent-to-own scheme and piloted it with our Marula Park development.
Okay, great, great. I think this has been like very informative, and I mean, right now you've actually even given a lot of people thrown some excitement in the air about this particular product. So as we round up this session, what I would say is that where can people find more information about Duo? Okay,
I think the first place to go is to go to the Duo website. So the Duo website is duo.mixtaafrica.com. You can also obviously follow our social media handles at mixtaafrica.com on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Or you can go to the Mixta Africa website and call a customer service rep, and there'll be someone to respond to your queries or your questions.
Okay. Then final questions. Do you have plans of keying into this scheme?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think if you're part of the team that developed this product, you obviously have to believe in it and see the rationale and reason behind it in other. So most definitely.
Okay. And I think, people that work at Mixta can even testify to this. When we launched, they started the NHF scheme and people keyed into it. The price at which those properties are going for have exponentially increased since then. So what I would even advise anybody to do is that, look, we're saying it right now, invest into this, key into this, and you don't want to regret it in the future that you didn't participate. So as we round up this session, we're now going to go into a session of Q&A. What we did yesterday was that we posted, we asked for people to send in questions that they might have about the scheme. So I'm just going to read out a few of them, and I'm going to ask you. Okay, so the first person, I think you've already answered this. How can I partake? I am a salary earner.
Well, I think the first thing to do is to fill the interest form. And
Okay.
Of course, if you're a salary earner, that's always a good thing.
And that's on the website, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
on the duo.mixtaafrica.com website.
Okay.
And then you fill the interest form, and you'll be contacted to complete a more detailed application form and submit your screening documentation.
Okay, fantastic. How much is the monthly rental?
Okay. So, well, I guess there are two things in there. For the 2-bed, fully finished Marula Park apartments, they are under the Duo scheme. They're going at 31.9 million.
Okay.
Now, rent is not on a monthly basis. Rent is on an annual basis. But however, you can pay your initial equity in 2 installments,
Okay.
right? And I think the other thing actually I should mention at this juncture is that the minimum equity is 5%, but you can decide you want to pay more. The minimum annual rent is 5%, but you can actually decide you want to pay more. Because the more you pay, it's deducted
less
from
you
the
have to
eventually
pay, yes.
from your home acquisition price, accounting for the time value of money. And so we don't have a monthly rental structure. What we have is an annual rent structure. So you pay your rent at the start of each rental period.
Okay. Okay, so the next question is, what is the product? Is it a bungalow, duplex, apartment? I think you answered
Yeah,
that.
the products are essentially apartments. We have 2-bedroom apartments, and they're fully finished apartments, like we had said earlier, and they're located in a thriving gated residential community on our Lagos Newtown land bank.
Okay. So I have a question here. Can people in the diaspora partake in this scheme?
Most certainly. I think people in the diaspora can certainly partake, obviously as investors, except they want to choose to come and live back home. I think one of the things we had said, and if you look at the FAQs, which are also available on our website, is that you can actually sublet the property. However, the contractual parties under the arrangement will be between ourselves as Mixta and you as the investor. So even if you choose to have a third party living there as a sublettee, you will ultimately be responsible for maintaining the apartment under the terms and obligations of your contract with us and under the tenancy agreement.
Okay, so there's another question here. So what happens if after the 3 years of renting the property, I'm probably not interested in continuing, or maybe I found something else in Lagos Newtown that I want to purchase? What's going to happen to the equity contribution that I've made and the rental payments I've made?
Okay, so the 3-year rental period is a maximum rental period. So there is no option to renewal. So at the end of the 3 years, you either have to convert via mortgage, and as part of our management of this scheme, we will obviously notify you of the notice period when you need to let us know whether you are walking away, choosing to exercise your option, or whether you're going to be converting via mortgage or paying outright cash. Now, if you think about it, if you were renting property and you had to leave that property, of course, the landlord would not be refunding you the rent, right? So I think anybody who keys into the scheme really it's because they believe that they have a reasonable path towards home ownership. And of course, part of our job at Mixta Africa is to potentially point you in the right direction as to how you could fast track your home ownership plans, maybe by providing you with a suite of potential mortgage providers, or making introductions to those mortgage providers. But those are obviously not guarantees. I think what this allows a prospective homeowner to do is to carefully plan and structure their path towards ownership. It allows you to buy time. It's relatively flexible and you don't feel under pressure. But if you're unable to convert at the end of 3 years, either through cash or a mortgage, then you essentially have to walk away and give the property back to Mixta. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's been informative. I have another question. What is the level of finishing? So, you said fully finished. So what should the occupier or the person keying into the scheme expect to have in the property?
So our fully finished units are essentially fully tiled, painted, doors, windows. Think about it is, can I move into this house today? Can I sleep in this house? All you need to bring really is your furniture, fitted wardrobes, fitted kitchen, but without appliances. Without the appliances, I should mention, and of course without the furniture. But this is a ready-to-move-in home. And so part of what you should also be thinking about towards the end of the completion and delivery of the home is what you need in order to allow you to either sublet the property or begin to live in the property.
Okay. So another question here, I think we have this from Instagram. So how long is the payment? So how long is the payment before you own it? So how much do you pay before you own the property?
Right. So you need to have paid the full value of the property before you own the property. That is different to what you need to have paid before you rent the property. Remember, ownership has to take place by a 3-year timeline.
Mm-hmm.
However, you start renting from year 1. So you need to have paid your minimum equity to rent and your first year's rent. That's what counts as tenancy. And of course, signing the tenancy agreement. So tenancy is different from ownership. Tenancy kicks into effect from March 2024 because it's an 18-month home delivery timeline. And after you've paid your first year's rent and signed your tenancy agreement with Mixta.
Okay. All right. So, I was going to ask a question, but I'm just going to ask this one before that. So this came from YouTube. Will the time value of money also be factored in my equity once I'm ready to convert?
Okay, so I need to understand the dynamic of the question. Your equity is 5%. Mm-hmm. So you pay your equity upfront. And remember, you can pay 10% or 20%, however much you can, but the minimum is 5%. Yeah. So when they say, will the time value be factored into the equity? The time value, I guess, is from our perspective as the
so
developer.
Maybe the final price of the product. So let's say year 1, year 2, I've decided not to convert, but I'm ready to convert at the end of the scheme, which is the 3rd year.
Yes.
There's a price that's been advertised on the platform.
Yes.
So is that price going to be the same?
The price you're keying in today is 31.9 million naira. That price is going to be, it will have an interest element for whatever amount of that price is outstanding at the point of conversion will be repriced based on an interest rate, less the amounts you have paid. So essentially, it means that, let's say all the amounts you have paid at the time you convert is 6 million naira. It's not just going to be a straight line 30 minus 6 million, i.e. 24. It would be 24 with a repricing element based on an interest rate, obviously, because 30 million naira today is not the same as 30 million naira
of course.
in 3 years' time. However, it's still competitive because of the rate of inflation in the economy, and the fact that you've also saved up towards that eventual purchase price.
And most likely the value of that property by that time will be more expensive than what you even have to be paying. So this
is a very fantastic point you've made, Tade, because remember, it's an off-plan model to some extent. Even though construction has already begun, you have an opportunity to key into a promo price now, right? By the time those homes are built, fully finished, if you are putting those homes on the market in 1 year time, in the first year of rent or in the second year of your rental, there would obviously be a lot more than 30 million. We probably would be looking at those homes in the current economy at somewhere around 40 million. Yes.
And that's the reality. And I
Yes.
think Nigerians like bonanza, so this is bonanza. Okay, so I have another question here. At what rate is the mortgage scheme at the end of the 3-year tenure?
Okay, well, I can't answer that question because it really depends on what mortgage scheme you decide to key into. It depends on whether you're taking something that is government-backed, like the National Housing Fund scheme, or a commercial bank mortgage, or a mortgage from a primary mortgage institution. So it really depends on the risk element. Obviously, mortgage pricing accounts for risk and the profile. So I would advise people who are interested in exiting or converting via mortgage to really start doing the work now of looking at what is available out there in the market. You can also speak to us because some of our other products are also bought under the National Housing Fund mortgage scheme. And we do have some relationships with PMIs, primary mortgage institutions, that we can help facilitate introductions for.
Okay, it's good you mentioned it because what I was going to say is that we currently have products that people can purchase using a mortgage. I know we have the NHF and there's another one that just launched. So, I mean, maybe you can give an indication of what interest rate is going for right now.
Okay.
So people can kind of like picture what it's going to look like then.
Okay, so under the National Housing Fund scheme, which is also available for Marula Park. So Marula Park obviously is big development, and you can pay cash for Marula Park, do a rent to own for Marula Park, or you can do a mortgage.
Solution.
Yeah, and actually you can also do a 18-month payment plan for Marula Park. So under the National Housing Fund scheme, if you're a salaried employee and you're contributing to NHF, which is 0.02% contribution from your salary every month into the National Housing Fund, you can get access to one-time access to a mortgage priced at 6%.
Okay.
Right, and for a minimum of around for up to 15 to 25 years. Yeah, again, this depends on your age and how much time you have to retirement. Okay. The maximum borrowing amount under the NHF scheme is 15 million naira. So you have to be sure that you have access to equity to make up the difference for the total home value. And there's also another mortgage scheme that's available for non-NHF providers at a slightly higher interest rate percentage, but we can also provide information on that scheme for you.
So people can always reach out and call us to find out more information about this.
But the one thing I would mention is that obviously for the mortgage schemes, the initial equity deposit is typically 10% and upwards.
Okay,
yes.
Interesting. I have another question here. This is actually interesting. So you have people, some investors actually thinking. So somebody just said, for the 3-year rental period, can I use it for Airbnb and short stays? So you have some people already thinking. So what would you say?
Well, I like the way I presume that's a Nigerian asking that question. We always see entrepreneurial opportunities wherever we can get them. Yeah. I think I wouldn't be drawn on the specific reference to Airbnb, but I will go back to what we said about your ability to sublet the property. However, people have to realize that regardless of whether you want to be an owner-occupier or you want to be subletting the property, you are ultimately responsible for the upkeep of that property within the terms of our arrangement with you. So you have certain rights, you have certain obligations to keep the property and maintain a certain state. So I think that's as far as I would go.
So what I just referenced as they always put it in products. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah,
so that's going to be
you.
on our website, so you'll be able to access that. So I have another question here. If the individual uses NHF, the maximum is 15. I think you answered this. It's 15 million. How does the subscriber pay the balance using 5% to rent per year?
Okay, so I think they may be mixing two things up here. So the National Housing Fund scheme is a separate product. It's a separate financial product. So maybe I should go back to the beginning. So you have a housing development, and there are different ways of acquiring that house. The rent-to-own scheme is one way, and under the rent-to-own scheme, 5% is essentially your marker. That 5% can be your minimum equity contribution or the minimum value of rent you have to pay every year. Now, like I said, you can pay more. The rent-to-own scheme is not the same as the National Housing Fund scheme, the NHF scheme. That is a separate financial product. It's a mortgage product. Now, you can decide that at the end of the rent-to-own scheme, you want to exit the scheme through a mortgage product, and that mortgage product can be an NHF product, right? So they're not the same thing. Or it could be another commercial product offered by a mortgage bank or a commercial bank, but they're not the same thing. Under NHF, your minimum equity deposit is usually 10%. Now, if you think you're not ready for rent to own, you can decide you want to immediately go down the NHF route. And of course, our customer service team will be happy to advise on how to go about pursuing the NHF route.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I have another question. Okay, somebody asked, can I subscribe to more than one unit under Duo? So this is another investor, I'm sure.
In the future, you probably will be able to, but because this is a pilot scheme, and in some ways, maybe we're trying to democratize housing access. So we said under this initial pilot, we're limiting subscriptions to 1 unit per person. But that's not to say that in the future, as we expand the scheme, that you won't be able to key into more than 1 unit.
Okay. So I have another question here. So can I make changes to the property whilst I'm still renting it? So I'm guessing the person means like external changes or internal. You know, some people want to set up their maybe kitchen in one area, extend. So what are the limitations? Are there any limitations to what changes I can make before I actually own the property?
Okay, well, I would say that when you pay your initial equity deposit, you obviously have some terms and conditions around the use of the property. And then when you sign your tenancy agreement, there will also be terms and conditions, obviously in keeping with Lagos tenancy laws. There will also be other agreements you have to enter into around facility management. Now, because you don't have title to the property, you won't have title to the property when you're renting because you're a tenant, you cannot make structural changes to the property. So you can't decide you want to break down a wall. However, you can decide you want to paint the interior of your apartment blue or pink. So I would say that for things that are aesthetic and superficial, right? Of course, you can make changes insofar as interior design is concerned. And it may even be that the changes you make, which are superficial, may actually impact the value of your home in the future. But what you can't do is make structural changes to the units or anything to the exterior of the apartments that may alter the optics because you're obviously not a landlord yet. You're still a tenant in that phase. Once the property is yours and you take possession of the documents anchored by ownership and title, then of course you can make further changes to it.
Okay, that's great. I think we have one more question. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to interpret what the person's reading here. Okay, yes, so you mentioned earlier on that there's a timeline to when you can key into this. So I think maybe you just want to quickly emphasize the timeline. I mean, from that, emphasize the structure from a timeline perspective. When do people have to key into the product? When is the last? And I think another question that came in was that, do I have like a deadline to which I'll be making my final payment to own the property? Or could I actually use a payment plan to complete payment for the property? Because you know, at the end of the rental period, you have to be paying the balance to own the property. So could I use a payment plan to complete that, or how will it work?
Okay, so I'll take your second question first. So once you come to the rental period, that's it. There's no further payment plan except you exit via mortgage, obviously. But the payment plan then is obviously you paying the bank the loan, right? But whilst you are in the tenancy period, you start making your preparations because your very last opportunity to convert and pay the balance will be on the very last day of the 3rd year's rental period. Okay. So it's important that you start early looking at your options and what you can afford and how your exit route is likely to materialize. In relation to the question on the deadline or the period within which you can key in and pay your equity deposit, I think the answer is yesterday. We launched this week. We launched this week. The availability period for these limited pilot units, the first release of this limited pilot units, is up until the 31st of August. So really the best time to key in is now. And then once we pre-qualified and screened you and told you you qualify, you then pay your equity deposit of 5%. And the first half of that deposit has to be received by the 31st of August. The second half can be paid in December. And there's a specific date that will be mentioned in December when you receive your offer letter.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A session. So do you have any final words? I mean, I know you've been giving out nuggets throughout this and providing people with ample information, but what would you like to say as your final word for the people listening?
Well, I think the final thing I would really say is that we are looking for ways to make homeownership easier, more accessible, and more affordable. And there is no better opportunity than now to partake in something like this as a first mover. Because in a few years' time, you would wish you had taken part, really. If you think about it, the entry barriers are much lower than many other things you would see on the market today. And we're really offering what is both a savings proposition. You know, I was just thinking we should probably have called this trio instead of duo. Because not only are you a tenant who's going to become a landlord, but actually you're a saver as well.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And will only count for you at the end of the day positively. So key into this now. Join us as we change the face of housing and real estate in Nigeria. Thank you. Okay, so that's it from us. Thank you very much for joining this session. We are excited about this product and we would like for you to key in. Like Rolake has said, the best time was yesterday. So the next opportunity you have is today. You never know, by tomorrow, everything could be sold out. So you don't want to waste any time. All right, so that's it from us. Thank you. Thank you.